Hi, I'm Geert Oliver, and I thought I'd just talk about my exhibition that I currently have here at Kingsbridge Art. It's primarily a solo collage exhibition, but I also have some guest artists participating. For example, a friend of mine from the UK, Colin Barnes, and here is a very well-known South African artist, Willie Bester. We also have another mixed media Willie Bester collage painting here. So the concept for the exhibition was basically just a body of work that I've been producing mostly 2022 to 23, but there's also some older works. I might point out one of them in a bit. Some of these works I literally made while after landing here for this trip. So this is a nice point of departure, basically a work that engages with politics, of course, the severity of US involvement in world affairs. You've got the Twin Towers coming down, tumbling, while you also have a space exploration rocket, which I believe is a US one, ascending. So not only do you have this contrast, which is typical of my collages of juxtaposition concepts, you also have emotional contrast. You have something coming down here and something ascending in the opposite direction. And even the tear seems to sort of embody that sort of thrust and the friction in opposite movements. The title also is What Goes Up Must Come Down, which is a bit of a humorous take on the whole thing. There's also other styles here, like this is a fully abstract collage I made in 24 as well. I sometimes engage with collage just like painting. So in this case, you know, that's like a yellow brush stroke. I've got some text in there, but it's not a narrative thing, although you can also relate to it in your own way through the text. Something here, it's more narrative. For example, it reminds me in the current context of our world affairs of the Palestinian devastation, but originally this is actually Leonardo da Vinci illustration or drawing contrasted with decaying factories in Detroit. But it's interesting that when you look at something like this, you can reinterpret it in a totally different context depending on your own psychology and your background. So we also have themes here of money laundering, economic manipulation, interesting interaction there between different currencies. I like to use found objects. This is a fake £20 note that was given to me in my days when I was a bartender in London. Here's a sign that you used to see in the old South Africa. I think that was screwed to like an electricity box. Even some stuff that you won't find it again, like this is a particularly fake casino coin that was used in Geneva on a party boat. I mean, it's a wide variety of found objects and crazy associations, but the text, I'm so proud of Dirty Money, makes you sort of think, personally it makes me think of the engagement between nationalism and corruption. You know, people getting manipulated, thinking that they are actually supporting a decent regime, while meanwhile they're being stolen from. Also, of course, relevant to South Africa in a big way. Above here, for example, is something totally different. This is a historical piece from 1996 by Sophie Peters. She, I believe, was I don't know how long she was active for before the date of this painting, but clearly that was just after South Africa became a democracy. So this work definitely has some political engagement, and you can see the collage element in there combined with painting. But she was one of the anti-apartheid artists, and yeah, the work is really nicely textured and a great example of collage. Another artist who's used collage from the beginning of his career is Willie Bester. This is a fantastic piece, incredible detail here. It's more sort of realistic and three-dimensional than the Sophie Peters work. You've got some photography, even this is like incredibly incorporated into the landscape, and this is painted but also in a hyper-realistic way. And these houses, I mean, I hope you can see this on the camera, but you really get a 3D perspective where that, you know, in relation to this, it just works. And these little bits in the foreground. It's a great work by Willie Bester, dated 2014. So it's already 10 years old, and also a fantastic piece. In contrast, over here, these works by Colin Barnes are 3D but flat abstraction. They look fantastic in these mounts that Kingsbridge Art made for us, and just great sort of modernist, bold works. I really love how they pop against the background. And yeah, I mean, Barnes does some painting with oil, acrylic, various mediums. He's quite an experimental artist, but better known for his painting. And these are like really great vintage examples of how he can do different styles of art. This is Pablo Malek, something from my collection that he's a really great collage artist. I love how he's incorporated these comics onto a cover of a magazine. Here's something of mine that's sort of minimal intervention. This is a vintage portrait, and I simply took a found object. I think this is from a modernist auction. I took this sculpture and positioned it so that this guy looks like his vision is boxed in, and the title Logician is sort of thinking about how we can sometimes have limited perspective as filtered through our minds. A bit like the William Blake painting of Newton, where he says that, or where he symbolizes Newton being caught up in his rational world and possibly unaware of everything going on around him. So yeah, I'll just point out a couple more. This, for example, is a contrast between this ideal biblical sort of Sunday school theme, and then behind it you've got a bomb going off in Palestine causing utter destruction. So that sort of contrast is something that I like to play with. Here we've got the Pentagon floating in the sky. It looks a bit like a UFO. In the background you've got the July the 4th firework display, and it's titled UFO. Basically, in a nutshell, it takes no brain cells to realize that the US has been involved with most of the wars of the last few decades, from Vietnam, Iraq, current war in Palestine included, and it's sort of a bit of a joke. When you see this UFO hovering above your country, you know there's going to be problems. Another thing that I've been doing more recently is this, for example, is entirely my own photography, so not found objects, but that is a photograph in the foreground of a sculpture I made with my brother Geert Oliver, and in the background is a jet engine that I photographed in Hungary probably in 2016. But somehow by combining these two, you get a Geiger-esque, monstrous ghost in the machine, which is also the title. And it's something I want to explore in the future, you know, entirely making collages from my own photography. This is something, again, entirely different. A newspaper print, which there was something about pop artists or Liechtenstein, that sort of thing. And I just ripped different parts of the very flat colored paper and created an idea that behind this face, this sort of idealistic, beautiful face, there is another reality which is even more abstract, and I think it's called below the surface. Yeah, so he's also got this sort of cocaine drip from her nose, you know, there's all sorts of implications there. Again, here I've used a Geert Oliver photograph with Found magazine. I think that was originally Will Smith sitting there, but now suddenly with this light bulb also hanging there, you get the feeling of a sort of Bacon-esque cube with this isolated figure. And this work was actually sold, so I'm quite pleased with that. But again, interesting to use my own photography and combined with commercial photography. Most often with something like this, which is one of my favorite works, it's all found photography from fashion mags, geological magazines. I use medical textbooks, you name it. The sources are infinite. Here, for example, we've got a Marcel Duchamp found object, the famous urinal, and I almost accidentally dropped it on top of this book called The Exploration of Africa, and instantly it resonated with me. I was thinking about how the found object, and specifically Duchamp, changed art history forever. Some people say he was the most influential artist of the 20th century, but now, ironically, Africa is investigating contemporary art, so to speak. It's almost like a reverse form of colonialism, where now Black African art is taking the art world by storm, and we have this interesting twist where Africa is now not invading but influencing Europe, and those are the sort of themes I try to explore there. Freudian slip there, saying exploit. Here we've got three great little works by Felix Laband, a guy that both me and Kingsbridge Art like to work with. He's a great musician and also a brilliant collage artist. Finally, we also have some themes of addiction. For example, here you've got this person in a bubble smoking some meth or something like that, but on the outside you've also got these sort of chromosomes asking questions about the nature of addiction. I also have to point out the theme of the show. So the show is called Love Your Mother. So there's various ways that can be interpreted. For example, here we've got the Christ child with his mother, but he has taken on this sort of omniscient psychedelic shape for his head, obviously the iris of an eye, but there's this relationship where he has almost superseded her in his knowledge, but still reverent towards his mum. Then I thought of, as we see here, sort of Africa and Mother Africa and our engagement with that. That might be a loose connection there, but this is of particular interest to me. Thinking of Mother Earth and how we need to take care of the earth. If we don't do so, we'll all end up dead, and future generations won't exist. And it occurred to me that the word earth, if you take the H off the back and you put it in the front, you have heart. And unless you have the earth in your heart, we will never save the planet. So on a personal level, on a political level, it is the only solution. And I like this engagement with text. It's also on a 1935 Atlas cover. I even have the original work here where I first discovered this interesting linguistic game. I had heart, I cut off the H, and then over there I've got it in a circular form, but this was sort of the original work. Again, here we've got a work on addiction, which is one of my favorites actually. This is some South African guys in a very desperate situation, but as they take drugs, you can see the floor disintegrating, and for a brief period of time they escape their current reality, but it never quite ends up dissolving completely, and they have to come back. You can see this brick sort of staying there, and then you can sort of imagine them escaping, coming back to reality, escaping, coming back to reality. Sadly, this sort of thing, addiction, is something that's affected all of us in some way or another. And on that note, even though it had nothing to do with drug addiction, my cousin sadly died on the 4th of September 2023, and I made this work in his honor. It's titled 4 September 2023, and you can see here, rest in peace, Alex. This is something that specifically for me is of personal value. That's why it's not for sale. It was my form of dealing with his death. But on a more universal level, that's what I love about collage. It can be therapeutic. It can be a way of making sense of the world for a brief period of time. You can take many elements that are broken, put them together as a whole, and even take charge of reality. Or you can become your own sort of creator of reality. Or you can just lose yourself in something abstract, where it's just a pure enjoyment of rearrangement of elements. But ultimately, I think it's, from time immemorial, it's been a way that you can engage with reality. For example, these things, at the background of these two paintings, are Spanish mandalas made from butterfly wings, believe it or not. Pretty incredible. And I found them back in South Africa ages ago. I came all the way from Spain. I found them in South Africa, and then they were damaged. So I just sort of incorporated these elements of the human body. You've got some candles in a circle there. These are quite spiritual pieces. Again, perhaps demonstrating some of my own psychology, but also just the beauty of life, as opposed to some of the more serious themes that we have on display here. So yeah, I hope that everyone catches a glimpse of my show through this video, but please feel free to come and see. The exhibition is on here in Kingsbridge Art until the end of March, so still up for a few weeks, and there's a lot to see here, including, lest I forget, some work by my brother. I particularly like this piece. So you can see at the back here you've got this sort of AI intelligence brain, but on the front what almost looks like a fossilized or burnt out cyborg or robot, and it's actually called AI Fossil. This is one of my favorite pieces by Rian on the show. And yeah, believe it or not, I'm still collaging, even though I'm getting on the plane later today. I've been making these collages here, and this is going to be in a show that Tian from Kingsbridge Art is putting on in April, I believe, called Duality. So I was making these two on Saturday. I've even just now added a little bits and pieces, but the two pieces were made at the same time. So I'll do a little bit of work here, then repeat that woman's eye here. And with a work like this, it's more about rhythm and, you know, the following of line, rather than trying to tell a story. Although the title is, for the two pieces together, it's a diptych. It's called Friend or Foe. So there you have the question friend or, and then you jump here, foe. But even little details like this text, what's wrong, and then a little bit of nudity, a lot of eyes, a lot of, I try to stick just to black and white mostly. So there's also the word race here, which makes you further interpret the idea of black and white, but some wonderful textures. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing these framed and displayed by Kingsbridge Art. I'm sure Kingsbridge Art will post something about it. So I hope you enjoyed the show, and thanks for the opportunity. Cheers.